demons enter through darkness, but that is a lie of simplicity. They enter through mirrors, through admiration, through obsession, through the quiet whisper that says, "You are almost perfect, if only you were a little stronger, a little leaner, a little more admired." The gym was never evil, but like every altar, it reveals what you truly worship. For where you spend your sweat, your time, and your attention, there lies your devotion. And if the body becomes the temple, it is easy to forget the God who dwells within it. There are men and women who walk into that sacred space of transformation with purity. They train to serve, to heal, to strengthen. But there are others who step inside, carrying an emptiness that no mirror can fix. Their workouts are not worship. They are warfare against their own reflection. They lift not to grow, but to silence the voice that says, "You are not enough." And though their muscles harden, their hearts grow hollow. Because pride is the heaviest weight a man can carry, and the gym has become the modern cathedral of pride. Once, man sought salvation in prayer. Now he seeks it in performance. Once he fasted to remember his dependence on the divine. Now he starves himself for definition. The cross has been replaced by the mirror, the psalm by the playlist. And though he sweats and grinds and transforms his flesh, he cannot understand why peace never arrives. He calls it discipline, but it is addiction in disguise, the addiction to control, the illusion that mastery of the body can redeem the soul. The demons of this age do not wear horns, they wear ambition. They whisper not sin, but improve. They tempt not with corruption, but with perfection. They do not ask you to fall. They convince you to climb endlessly, pointlessly, up a mountain that has no summit. And when you reach what you thought was the top, you find another peak, higher still, calling you with that same deceitful promise, just a little more. It is not evil to build your strength. It is divine to honor the body that was given. But it becomes idolatry when the mirror tells you who you are instead of your maker. Every repetition without gratitude, every flex without humility, every comparison without compassion, these are small invitations to darkness. Because pride is the oldest possession. It was pride that turned angels into demons, beauty into arrogance, discipline into obsession. Look around any gym in this modern age, and you will see not just bodies training, but souls performing. Faces locked in silent competition, eyes flicking to mirrors and screens, measuring worth by inches and likes. We no longer train to serve life. We train to display it. The sacred act of discipline has been hijacked by ego. We no longer lift for purpose. We lift for proof. Proof that we exist. Proof that we matter. Proof that we can control what life will one day take from us, our youth, our flesh, our illusion of permanence. This is where the demons enter not as supernatural creatures, but as invisible habits of thought. They creep in when you begin to believe your value is visible. They thrive in comparison, in envy disguised as inspiration, in vanity disguised as motivation. They whisper, "You are your image. You are your progress. You are your body." And in chasing that illusion, the soul forgets that its strength was never meant to be seen, only to be used. The strongest man in the room is not the one who lifts the most, but the one who can lift his pride and lay it down. The most disciplined woman is not the one who tracks every calorie, but the one who can forgive herself when she fails. There is a quiet holiness in restraint, in knowing when enough is enough. But the culture has no room for enough. It worships more sets, more followers, more perfection. And more has no ceiling, only collapse. The body, beautiful as it is a temporary house. The spirit is the eternal resident. But the moment the house begins to believe it is the master, the order of creation inverts. And that inversion, that rebellion of flesh over faith, is the true invitation to darkness. Because when you worship the temporary, the eternal within you begins to starve. You start to trade joy for judgment, love for validation, peace for performance. You lose your reflection, not to the devil, but to your own desire. There is nothing wrong with discipline. There is nothing wrong with the gym. The corruption is not in the steel, but in the story you tell yourself while you lift it. If the story is pride, it poisons you. If the story is gratitude, it purifies you. The same action, the same motion, can either enslave or enlighten depending on the motive behind it. A humble workout is worship. A vain one is witchcraft, the subtle kind, the kind that enchants the self into forgetting its source. Ask yourself, when you train, who are you becoming? Are you chasing strength or running from weakness? Are you building a temple for service or a shrine for attention? Are you polishing the vessel or worshipping it? These questions burn because they expose the truth that most of what we call self-improvement is just self-idolatry with better lighting. And yet, even in this vanity, grace still moves, because every repetition, every drop of sweat, every aching muscle carries a message from eternity. You were made for more than mirrors. The energy you waste on image could move mountains if aimed at meaning. The same willpower that sculpts the body could heal the world if surrendered to love. You are not wrong to desire strength. You are only mistaken in believing it comes from the flesh. Real strength begins where pride ends. The gym could be holy ground if only you entered it with awareness. Every breath could be a prayer. Every lift a metaphor for rising from despair. Every step a remembrance that you were not built merely to impress, but to endure. Imagine if every person who trained saw their motion as meditation, not an escape from weakness, but an expression of gratitude for existence itself. The world would change. Vanity would become virtue. Self-worship would transform into stewardship. But for now, the demons still linger, not because they have power, but because we keep feeding them. They eat our comparison, our jealousy, our endless scrolling for validation. They thrive on the energy we pour into image instead of intention. And so long as the mirror remains our master, they will live there in the reflections we mistake for reality. The cure is not to flee the mirror, but to see through it, to look not at the body, but at the being, to see the reflection not as perfection to chase, but as creation to honor, to realize that every muscle, every line, every imperfection is evidence of life, the gift we did not earn but were entrusted with. Gratitude breaks every curse. It turns the mirror from a portal of pride into a window of worship. When you lift from gratitude, the body no longer competes. It cooperates. The gym becomes a sanctuary, the weights a teacher, the sweat a hymn. You learn that strength without humility is violence, but strength with humility is virtue. You begin to understand that the true enemy was never weakness, but the illusion that you had to be flawless to be loved. You begin to notice that the same discipline that once enslaved you can also save you, if only the motive changes. The demon does not live in the act itself. It lives in the intention. Every repetition is a prayer, or it is a curse. Every drop of sweat is either sacrifice or show. The difference is so small that most never notice it, and yet it defines the distance between pride and peace. When you lift to dominate, you feed the ego. When you lift to discover, you feed the soul. The same motion, the same exertion, one imprisons, the other redeems. The discipline that once came from fear can be transformed into one born of reverence. There is a sacred silence hidden in the rhythm of training, the steady breath, the beating heart, the quiet war between effort and surrender. This is not a battlefield of muscle, but of meaning. Each set becomes a sermon to yourself, each failure a confession of limitation, each success a moment of humility. Because when you truly push yourself, you realize the body is not infinite, and in that realization, the soul awakens to the truth that it is. The body was never the enemy. It was the message, a reminder written in flesh that strength is temporary and therefore precious. You care for it not because it makes you powerful, but because it allows you to serve. You train it not to be worshipped, but to be useful. The world confuses the two. It shouts, "Build for beauty," but the soul whispers, "Build for purpose." Beauty fades, but purpose fortifies. A beautiful body without a beautiful mind becomes a weapon. But a strong body in service of love becomes an instrument of divine will. There is a quiet kind of holiness that descends when you stop fighting yourself, when the workout ceases to be a punishment and becomes a partnership, when you stop chasing an image and start cultivating an offering, you begin to understand that self-control is not about suppression, but about direction, that the energy that once fueled vanity can fuel virtue. The discipline that once sought approval now seeks alignment. You no longer lift for the eyes of men, but for the honor of what gave you breath. This is where power changes texture. It ceases to be loud. It becomes light. The strongest person in the room is not the one grunting beneath the heaviest bar, but the one whose silence radiates balance, the one who knows when to stop, when to rest, when to honor limits without shame. For the world worships limitless ambition, but the soul remembers that everything infinite belongs to God. To respect your boundary is to respect your design. And when you honor your design, you begin to live by divine order instead of human exhaustion. There is a moment, somewhere between exhaustion and peace, where the veil thins, where pain and purpose become indistinguishable. It happens in the middle of a set, when your muscles scream and the mind says, I can't, and something deeper answers, watch me. In that instant, you touch eternity. Because that voice, that quiet strength that rises when everything else has failed, that is the Spirit of God within you reminding you of your source. You thought you were training the body, but the body was training your faith. This is what most people miss, that the spiritual and the physical are never separate. Every act of discipline shapes both. When you deny the body a temptation, you purify the soul. When you push through fatigue, you prove that the mind is not slave to matter. When you fall and rise again, you live the oldest parable of resurrection. You do not need a pulpit for faith. You need presence. Because holiness has never been confined to churches, it waits wherever a human being meets their limit and chooses love over pride. Imagine if every gym became a temple of gratitude instead of comparison. Imagine if every mirror reflected not vanity, but virtue. If every flex became thanksgiving for the miracle of motion, then the world would change, not because the buildings would, but because the people inside them would. The same steel that now binds would begin to bless. The same sweat that now glorifies self would glorify creation. The same space that now breeds envy would become the birthplace of humility. But for that to happen, something deeper must die. The image of perfection you worship must be crucified. The idea that you are not enough must be buried. The obsession with becoming must bow to the reverence of being. This is the death every ego fears. The death every saint embraces, the surrender that looks like defeat to the world, but is victory in the spirit. When you stop performing and start becoming, the false gods lose their hold. There is freedom in imperfection. The scar tells the story of survival. The weakness tells the story of faith. The fatigue tells the story of endurance. These are not flaws. They are sacraments. The body records every act of courage, every refusal to quit, every quiet return after failure. The world sees flesh, heaven sees faith. And when you start seeing yourself that way, you no longer fear imperfection. You begin to understand that even broken vessels carry divine light, sometimes more purely than those that have never cracked. That is the secret the demons never want you to learn. That humility is the only power they cannot imitate. Pride they can mimic. Charity they can counterfeit. But humility disarms them entirely, because it admits no illusion of control. A humble man cannot be possessed, for he already belongs wholly to truth. He may stumble, he may fail, but he will always rise, because his strength does not come from self-image, it comes from surrender. In that surrender, something extraordinary happens. The mirror becomes meaningless. You still look, but you no longer seek. You train, but you no longer compare. You feel strong, but you no longer boast. You live as one who knows that every breath, every heartbeat, every rep is grace on loan, and gratitude becomes your reflex, not forced, but natural, like breathing. And once gratitude becomes your rhythm, joy follows. Not the fragile joy that depends on approval, but the quiet, unshakable joy that comes from alignment. The world cannot give it, and so it cannot take it. You will still walk among the proud and the vain, but you will not be like them. Your peace will unsettle them, Your calm will convict them. Your contentment will confuse them. Because nothing frightens the ego more than someone who no longer needs it. You will move through that gym, through that temple of mirrors and music with eyes that see beyond. You will nod to others, not in competition, but in compassion. You will understand that everyone there is fighting their own invisible war, not against weakness, but against worthlessness. You will see that every person lifting heavy is trying to prove they exist, that every exhausted face is a prayer for peace in disguise. And instead of judging, you will bless them quietly, invisibly, sincerely. That is how you cast out demons now, not by shouting at the darkness, but by being light within it, not by condemning those who worship their reflection, but by showing them what it means to reflect love instead. You will not preach, you will radiate, and in your stillness, others will feel something ancient and familiar, the presence of peace, the whisper of truth, because the gym was never cursed. It was waiting for someone to remember that every space where humans strive can become sacred if they bring awareness into it. The demons were never creatures. They were conditions, habits of thought that crumble in the face of consciousness. And now, consciousness has returned. The same man who once trained for vanity now trains for vision. The same woman who once punished her body now praises it. The same floor that echoed with competition now hums with calm. Nothing outside changed, only intention did. And in that transformation, the holy returns to the human. When strength ceases to be spectacle and becomes service, everything changes. You no longer lift to conquer, you lift to carry. You no longer train to dominate, you train to deliver. Power is no longer measured by what you can hold, but by what you can give away. The truest sign of strength is gentleness, the ability to touch without harm, to guide without pride, to stand tall without casting shadow. The strong man who kneels becomes the holiest of warriors. The disciplined woman who serves becomes the quiet architect of renewal. For in this world that worships might, mercy is the ultimate rebellion. Every gym, every place of striving was always meant to teach this. It was meant to reveal that the body is not the end, but the instrument. When you lift, you are practicing responsibility. When you endure, you are learning patience. When you fail and return, you are embodying resurrection. Every rep, every set, every sweat-stained breath was a rehearsal for the life you were meant to live. Beyond those walls, the life of compassion disguised as ordinary strength. You start to understand that your power was never meant to stay contained. It was meant to overflow. You become the one who notices the weary, the newcomer, the one too ashamed to begin. You recognize the look in their eyes because once it was yours. You remember what it felt like to hate your own reflection, to crave validation like oxygen. And so you reach out, not to preach, but to welcome, not to fix, but to accompany. And in that moment, the iron sanctuary becomes sacred ground again because love has re-entered it. To be strong in spirit is to be unoffended, to walk among vanity without envy, to see through arrogance and still forgive. That is mastery. That is what the body was training you for all along, not to lift metal, but to lift souls, not to prove yourself, but to improve the world through presence. The man who can deadlift twice his weight, but cannot lift another spirit, is still weak. But the one who can stoop low to serve, even after triumph, carries a strength that no injury can break. This is where the divine pattern begins to reveal itself. You start to see that everything external mirrors something internal. The repetition of exercise mirrors the repetition of prayer. The breaking down of muscle mirrors the breaking down of pride. The rebuilding after rest mirrors the renewal of grace. The same principle governs both body and soul. Growth through surrender, power through patience, resurrection through struggle. There is no division between sacred and secular when your heart is aligned, only one long act of devotion lived in many forms. And then something miraculous happens. You stop comparing progress altogether. The mirror no longer taunts, it testifies. You see yourself and feel gratitude, not judgment. You thank the Creator for design, for motion, for endurance. You no longer desire perfection because you finally understand that perfection already exists, not in your shape, but in your purpose. Every scar, every limitation, every flaw was woven into your story so that humility would have a home. This revelation changes how you treat others. You stop competing and start connecting. You cheer when someone else succeeds because their victory is no longer a threat to your worth. You help when someone fails because their fall reminds you of your own rising. You begin to see humanity as one great body, many limbs, many strengths, many weaknesses, all sustained by one unseen spirit. And when that vision takes root, comparison dies. The old demons of envy, vanity, pride, and insecurity begin to starve. They cannot survive in the presence of gratitude. They cannot breathe in humility. They cannot follow you into love, because love requires self-forgetfulness. They fade like shadows when the light of compassion enters. And all at once, the gym, that place of mirrors and sweat, becomes an altar again, consecrated not by ritual, but by revelation. It is a strange kind of peace. You find yourself enjoying the effort again, but for different reasons. You lift not to escape life, but to embody it. You sweat not to prove worth, but to honor breath. You endure not to achieve, but to remember. Every motion becomes meditation. Every ache becomes offering. The body, once an idol, becomes an instrument of prayer. And as you move, you feel the quiet rhythm of something larger, the heartbeat of creation pulsing through you, the same energy that raised the mountains and calms the seas. In that stillness, between sets, between breaths, you realize that strength was never yours to begin with. It was always borrowed. The body is a temporary lease on eternity, a vessel on loan from the divine. And once you understand that, you handle it differently. You treat your health not as possession, but as responsibility. You eat not for indulgence, but for stewardship. You rest not for laziness, but for reverence. You begin to live like one entrusted with something sacred, and that is the ultimate transformation, when the pursuit of strength becomes gratitude for grace. You start to measure success not in weight lifted or goals achieved, but in peace maintained. You can face the noise of the world and remain centered. You can feel the old temptations and no longer obey. You can witness the vanity around you and feel compassion instead of superiority, because you no longer need to be better. You only need to be true. When the heart reaches this maturity, the body follows. It grows calmer, healthier, more harmonious. You stop punishing it for imperfection. You stop chasing the endless better. You give it what it needs, not what ego demands. And suddenly, energy flows freely again. Creativity awakens. Joy returns. Even your strength feels lighter, because it is finally aligned with love instead of pride. This is how discipline becomes devotion. Not through dramatic change, but through gentle awareness. The shift is subtle, from self-focus to self-offering, from proving to serving, from vanity to virtue. You wake up one morning and realize that everything around you is the same, but you are not. The world has not changed, but your sight has. The demons did not disappear, they became irrelevant. You see them for what they are, old fears dressed in new words, and they hold no more power, because love has replaced fear. Gratitude has replaced guilt. Awareness has replaced ambition. And in that alchemy of the soul, the curse turns to blessing, the mirror to ministry, the gym to grace. You will know you have crossed the threshold when the noise fades and movement feels like prayer, when your breath slows to the pace of eternity, and your heart beats with gratitude instead of urgency. The gym no longer feels like a proving ground, but like a sanctuary. You are no longer a competitor. You are a caretaker of your body, of your purpose, of the world entrusted to you. You move with intention, you speak with awareness, and you begin to see that all of life, the struggle, the sweat, the stillness, has been sacred all along. For years you thought you were chasing perfection, but now you understand you were being led to presence. The perfection you longed for was not in symmetry of muscle or mastery of form. It was in the wholeness of being one with what you do. When your actions align with your soul, you enter the state the mystics called peace. Nothing to prove, nothing to hide, nothing to fear, just breath and being. The weight you carry no longer feels heavy because it has purpose. Every repetition becomes remembrance. That strength was given to you so that others could be lifted too. The greatest men and women are not those who stand on stages or post their triumphs, but those who bear burdens quietly so others may rest. They walk among us unnoticed trainers of the unseen, builders of spirit. They do not preach, they demonstrate. Their presence itself becomes a sermon that says, "See, it is possible to be powerful and peaceful at once." They move through the same chaos, but their eyes remain kind, their tone gentle, their hearts undisturbed. They know the secret that ends all competition, that the only opponent worth conquering is the ego that fears insignificance. You realize, then, that there were never truly 5 gym habits that invite demons. There were only 5 doorways through which pride enters: vanity, comparison, envy, obsession, and control. And each one can be redeemed by its opposite: humility, gratitude, compassion, surrender, and faith. The demons were never outside of you. They were your own unguarded desires, your own misdirected fire. But even they were not enemies, only messengers, guiding you toward balance. Every temptation was a teacher. Every fall was instruction in grace. And so the gym becomes not a battlefield, but a classroom. The body becomes not an idol, but an ally. The discipline you once used to chase approval becomes the same discipline you now use to chase truth. You lift not to inflate the self, but to dissolve it until only service remains. This is the paradox that every wise soul discovers, that strength is found in surrender, and surrender is the highest form of control. You no longer fight your reflection, you bless it. You no longer despise your weakness, you use it to understand others. You no longer fear imperfection, you see God shimmering through its cracks. When you train like this, you start hearing something deeper than the music or the machines, a kind of quiet hum beneath everything. The rhythm of your breath syncs with it. The beat of your heart follows it. It is the pulse of life itself, the same vibration that spins galaxies and opens flowers. You realize you were never alone in your effort. Every motion of your body was echoed by creation, every act of growth mirrored by the cosmos. You were never the lifter, you were the lifted. And the moment you feel that, the entire illusion of isolation falls away. There is no need to escape the world once you understand how to see it. You can walk through vanity untouched, through greed uncorrupted, through temptation unshaken, because your sight has changed. The curse breaks not when the world becomes pure, but when you do. The mirror that once enslaved you now liberates you because you no longer see yourself. You see the divine energy animating you. The face that stares back is not an idol. It is evidence of grace. You begin to move differently through your days. You speak with more care. You choose patience over pride, compassion over conquest. You feel no need to argue or impress, because truth needs no defense. You realize the highest form of power is peace. The loud boast is forgotten, but the quiet example remains. Your life itself becomes a sermon written not with words, but with alignment. And through you, others remember what they had forgotten, that strength was never meant to separate, but to connect. The body, the gym, the practice, all of it was only rehearsal for this. To learn what it means to inhabit form without worshiping it. To walk through flesh while remembering spirit. To carry the gift of energy with humility. To use what is temporary to express what is eternal. That is the harmony every saint and sage, every artist and athlete has been reaching for since the dawn of time. The integration of heaven and earth, muscle and mercy, matter and meaning. There will still be days when pride calls you back, when you glance at the mirror and the old hunger stirs. But now, instead of shame, you smile, because you know that even this urge is holy. Another reminder that your work is not to be flawless, but faithful. You breathe, you return to gratitude, and the peace returns instantly. For peace was never lost. It only waited for attention. And one day, when the lights dim and the noise of ambition fades, You will remember this journey not as a struggle, but as a song of awakening of flesh, learning to sing with spirit, of strength remembering its source. The demons you feared will be gone, their voices replaced by stillness. The body you once fought will rest in grace. The mirror will reflect not a conqueror, but a servant, radiant with humility. And in that quiet moment you will understand that holiness was never far from you. It hid in the repetition of effort, the ache of endurance, the humility of failure, the warmth of service. It waited in every place you thought too ordinary for divinity. The gym, the street, the office, the home, all of it was sacred once you chose to see, because the line between sacred and secular exists only in the eyes of the unawakened. To the one who remembers, everything is God's gym. The heart, his instrument, the world, his weight, every breath, another chance to lift love higher. And so, you return each day not to chase demons away, but to invite grace in. You lift with awareness. You move with mercy. You live with purpose. The mirror no longer enslaves, it enlightens. The iron no longer binds, it builds. And every motion of your life becomes one prayer, spoken in the language of gratitude. Thank you for the body that moves. Thank you for the strength that serves. Thank you for the spirit that remembers. And when the day comes that your strength fades, when your hands grow frail and your heartbeat slows, you will not fear it. You will smile, because you will know that every rep, every breath, every humble act was never lost. It was all transformed into light, still burning in the hearts of those you touched. And as you exhale that final breath, you will hear the same whisper that began it all, soft, eternal, certain. You have finished the set. You have run the race. You have kept the faith. And the light that fills you then will not blind, it will recognize you, because it was the same light that lifted you from the beginning. You were never cursed. You were never fighting demons. You were only learning to see God in the mirror.